All right, today we're doing common percentages, 10%, 20%, 5%, and 15%. So, and we're going to use them in increases and decreases on the original amount. So let's say the original amount is 200. We want to do a 10% increases. Okay, first, let's make some demarcation here. 200 represents 100% of the original number. Okay, a 10% increase, you basically move the decimal back and 200 becomes 20. So 20 is actually 10%. To make a 10% increase, once you know what 10% is, you add them together. You get 220, and 220 represents 120%. Because this, whereas this is 100%, this is the 20% increase, or should I say 120. All right, let's do a 20% increase. Sorry, that was a 10% increase. Let's do a 20% increase. Once you know what the 10% is, you can kind of figure out all the other three. Okay, so 200 is your original. That's 100%. And to get a 20% increase, you look at your 10% increase, which is 20, and you just double that. So that'll be basically your 20 times 2, which is going to be 40. So 40 is my 20% increase. Again, you just double this value here. All right, now let's put those together. And we get 240. That represents 120%. Okay, which is a 20% increase. All right, let's do the 5%. Again, once you know the 10%, you can figure out the others. All right, now the 10% is 20. So what I'm going to do is take 20, I'm going to divide that by 2, and I'll get 10. So this represents 5%. So 200 represents 100%. 10, which is half of the 10%, 10 represents the 5%. And when I increase it, bless you, we get 110, which represents 105%. Okay, let's go to the 15%. To do the 15%, what we need is the 10% answer and the 5% answer. The 10% answer is 20, plus the 5% answer is 10. So that means that a 15% will be the combination of these two, which is 30. So let's go here. So 200 represents 100%. 30 represents 15%. And we put them together, we get 230, which represents 115%. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about where you would find increases. Increases commonly come in several places. For instance, taxes. Taxes are always an increase. So you see the price at 100%, then they tax you at a certain percent, and that makes it higher, or that's an increase. So this is basically what they're doing when they add a tax to you. Another type of increase would be your when you give tips. The original bill is the 100%, and what you pay is the a percentage increase. Typically, you pay for tips 15%, kind of average, up to about 20% if it's really good. So these are 2% that you typically use for tipping. All right, now let's talk about decreases. All right, so we have 200. 10% would be 20. Now a decrease here, again, this represents 100%. This represents 10%. So your decrease is 20 from 200, which leaves you 180. Or should I say this is a 90%. Again, a 10% decrease gives you 90% at the end. In this case, it's 180. Now, 5%. 5% is half of the 10%. So this is 200 divided by 2, which is 10. So this will be 200. Let's get some demarcation here. That represents 100%. 10 represents 5%. And we're going to decrease it. So this is 190, which represents 95%. Okay. So a 5% decrease gives us 95%, which in this case ends up being 190. Okay, let's go to a 20% decrease. Okay, to get a 20% decrease, we can look at what the 10% was, which is 20 multiplied by 2, we get 40. So 200 represents 100%. 40 represents 20%. And when we subtract this, we get 160. That represents 80%. Okay, so 200 with a 20% decrease gives you 160, which in essence is 80% of the original. Okay, let's talk about 15% decrease. With a 15% decrease, that's basically the 10% and the 5% added together. So it's the 20 plus the 10, which is 30. So we get 200, which is 100%. 30, that represents 15%. And we're gonna make a decrease, we get 170, and this represents 85%. Okay, now where do you typically find decreases? Decreases is when you find things on sale. They'll say this is 5% off, this will be 10% off, 20% off, 15% off. And these are very frequent sale percentages that they'll give you. 10, 20, 5, and 15. So these are ways to find out what your final cost is. Just one note that in the world of retail, yes, they will give you the discount and you'll end up with these amounts. Then they treat these as the original 100% and they put an increase on those as far as taxes. I think here in Florida, the tax is about 6.5%, which we're not going to work with. We'll just work with 10s, the 20s, 5s, and 15s.